Smashing. Where are you today, Jason?
I'm at home.
Where's home now?
It's Nottingham still, and I'm in an area called West Bridgford.
I don't quite know that, but I do know I do know Grantham. Grantham.
Yes, Grantham. Yes, that's where I'm from.
Yeah, so I'm from Doncaster.
Oh, okay.
My dad used to work in Grantham, but it holds a traumatic place in my heart because I once left a guitar on the train in Grantham.
Oh, you're kidding.
Yeah, bad times. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, fucking hell, mate.
I am
No.
over it. I am over it now, like, but
Good.
just
Oh, yeah, yeah.
it is my link to Grantham, like.
Yes, right. Okay. Well, I guess the scar still lingers, doesn't it?
This is it, mate. These things they callous and they make who we are. And
Yes.
the new record's out today. How's that feel?
Brilliant. Yeah. So far, we've had a really good response to it. Um, Seventh album in, and you kind of like people are the people, the press, whatever. They get sick of it. They get sick of bands. Attention spans veer off to something else. Markets change, times change. But in our case, we seem to prevail. We seem to get better
Yeah,
as this goes on.
yeah. It doesn't feel like people have had enough, does it? I wonder whether
No,
I mean, part of me wonders whether Rough Trade are involved in. I feel like maybe Rough Trade is some sort of like some sort of political think tank that is conspiring to make the country a big cesspool of shit in order to make your records feel very of the moment.
well, it's not an absurd notion, is it? Really, given the amount of absurdities that are reality these days. So yeah, I could quite understand that. But alas, no, they are just merely a humble record label that don't bother us. And occasionally, after 2 years after an album comes out, they'll throw an email over and ask us if we've got any demos, and we'll get from there. You know what I mean?
I mean, the first time I was aware of your band is I used to edit a music magazine that was had an office that um, that was next door to Mojo magazine, and
Yeah,
I remember someone from Mojo being like, and this is like 10 years ago. This is a long time ago. Someone being like, "Oh, you need to check out this band Sleaford Mods," and they sort of did like an impression of you. I can't remember which song it was, and I remember thinking, "Oh, right, that's right on my street." But that's a fair time ago now. But when did you feel like people were people had started to get what it was that you were doing?
around sort of 2013 or 2012,
Oh,
towards the
right.
end of 2012.
So around that
Uh,
time, then, really.
yeah, it was. People were coming to the gigs who had known either myself and Andrew for years, and were quite impressed. Like you could tell.
Yeah.
So, but it took until sort of 2013 for people to, because people just associated myself with failure, and just I was just a loser really in a lot of people's eyes. A
Right.
nice guy, but I wasn't going anywhere. And Andrew as well. So when things did start happening, it was just like they couldn't believe it. So there was a lot of disbelief and silence really, and it was
But,
brilliant.
but yeah, I mean, when you think about that, I mean, I sometimes think that these perceptions that we have of ourselves aren't always accurate, like because we're inside our own craniums, and
I
uh,
suppose, yeah, yeah, very true. Actually, that's a good point. Yeah,
but at the same time, I'm definitely prone to uh, thinking a lot about. I don't know, thinking a lot. I'm very prone to looking back. So
yeah.
if you were to look back, what was it that you? I mean, what changed? I mean, I'm just gonna
Mm,
hypothesize what I kind of feel it
mm,
is, right? I feel a
mm,
little bit like, say, with Sleaford's, like
mm,
you don't start making that kind of music, or you don't have that idea for a band, or you don't start writing those songs if you're thinking, we're gonna hit the big time, right? It's like you're doing something that you think is different and that matters, and I wonder
yeah.
whether that was the moment that it started to gather real traction because it it was very real for what you were about.
Mm, mm.
Mm.
Yeah, it was. I think it was. I had nothing else in the end apart from a pen and paper, and I was watching the telly in some house I was renting a room in. Nobody else was in. I had a cup of black coffee on the floor. Uh, instant coffee. I couldn't afford milk. I had nothing. I was living month to month by the skin of my teeth. My own fault. I spend it all on drugs on payday. You know what I mean? But I was sick of it. Life was shit. It was just crap, and I got nowhere for years and years. And in the end, I just started writing about, you know, going up to the newspaper shop to buy alcohol in your pajamas, because you just can't be asked to get dressed. You're just pissed off.
Yeah.
Um, and not the embarrassment of that, but the kind of shame, So all of that started to really. It struck me as this is all I had left, and this is what I'd become, and so therefore I would talk about it. Do you know what I mean? So it started from there. Really, this was like a few years before I met Andrew. So around the time of meeting Andrew, I got a bit more politicised. I read Owen Jones's Chavs and started reading books by Herbert Marcuse and started looking into critical thinking. It was like a revelation.
Right.
And that's when I started to connect my anger, this confusing anger that I always had, with the reason why it was there, perhaps. And a lot of that was sociological and political. You know what I mean?
Did you do that all on your own, or did you have any kind of help?
No, I just did it on my own. I think for a long time I started getting really fucked off with towards the end of Labour's premiership. I just got a lot. I was getting really fucked off with all these pointless guitar bands, and really fucked off with the lie that was, Cool Britannia, that was social mobility. It turned people into fucking idiots. But Blair's government did a few good things. Let's not beat around the bush. It was certainly better than what we've got now, but
Yeah.
it was still an extension of neoliberalism, of capitalism. It sent people wappy. Cocaine was had become just as popular as lager. The sex industry was all over the place, and what I mean by that is lap dancing clubs. That paired with cocaine just turned people into fucking demons. And that kind of overhung, I think, my world. And I was thoroughly not cynical, but I just started to think this is no good. No good at all.
I read a thing that I was reading Miranda Sawyer's piece, that her Observer piece, which I thought was brilliant, and you were talking a bit about anger and the way that you were brought up, and I thought it was impressive just how kind of frank you were about maybe like some of the wrinkles in your own personality, and I have to say that I did relate to it in the sense that growing up, I mean, I think I'm about 10 years younger than you, but like growing up where I grew up, when I moved to London, I went to work for the NME when I was 25, and I probably spent about 3 years just in abject fury, and I'm almost like a little bit ashamed of it now, actually, because I don't think it was anyone else's fault. I think actually I was being a little bit kind of myopic in the way that I saw other people, but I definitely had a chip on my shoulder, and I felt like the people that I worked with just didn't have any. They didn't know where I'd come from. Like they would talk about their experiences growing up, and they would be. I mean, this is obviously very sort of it was more complicated than this, right? Because when you start, every human has had difficult experiences, but
Of course.
on the face of it, it was like they'd had opportunities, they'd had culture, they'd had
Mm. Mm.
opportunities to learn, and
Mm.
and I didn't come from that, and
Yeah.
I get. Can you kind of relate to that, because it felt a little bit like that's where some of the anger came from, in a sense, for you?
Yeah. Well, but I was unaware of that at the time.
Yeah.
Um, and I wasn't aware of that really until the band took off, and then all these other bands started coming up that were just seemed a little bit more enlightened. You know what I mean? As people, as personalities. Um, it's a tough one, like you say, because everybody goes through their own tragedies, and life. You don't get away with it. Nobody gets away with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just got fucking sick and tired of being sidelined by people that I thought weren't exactly adhering to a narrative they'd experienced, and were just quite cliched and a bit cheesy, and just pulling out all the usual stops. In
Yeah.
that, I got to. It made me realise that is what makes commercial music so popular, because the mass audience, they're not really that engaged. They go for cliche because it suits their temperament. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I am super interested though about I am super interested, as a man, in other men that do talk about anger though. I don't think it's ever been something that's, I've got friends that it's definitely threatened to consume.
Yeah,
I think I've always been a bit softer than that, but I've definitely had my moments.
yeah.
How do you feel like that's become like a fuel in a good sense now, or do you still worry about it being present in you?
Well, it's a tough one with anger. I got really obsessed with it over lockdown, and after lockdown, post lockdown, I became obsessed with the idea of being in a suitable physical condition to start hitting people, because I thought that's what I was going to have to do. Why was I thinking that? Why was I thinking that I was going to have to start hitting people? I
What
think
think?
just a general paranoia of trolls, of the country becoming more far right. At one point I was going to have to defend myself. It was going to happen. I was going to encounter somebody like this.
Right.
But also, what was mixed in with that was all of the hang-ups that I've got, and traumas and resentments as well. So it was quite a melting pot. And I do lose my temper a fair bit, or did. And I started having psychotherapy again this time last year, because I was just I was in a bad way. I was like coming back from tour, smashing things up or throwing things, and arguing with my wife. You know what I mean? So, and I don't want my children to see this. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
They're
Totally.
going to see a little bit, obviously, because you can't shield them from everything, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Also, to see disagreement and another side of somebody's personality, but it got to a point where I was just punching holes in walls, and it's like, where's it going to go next? So I had to have I just got myself sorted out a bit, and it all comes down to trauma, and a feeling of self-worth. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Has the success of the band not plugged that, in a sense, though?
Sorry.
Has the success of the band not plugged that, in a sense?
No, it makes it worse, because the entertainment game, the music industry especially, it's fucking horrible, and it's
Yeah.
you if you don't. We were quite a buzz band. We were fortunate enough to experience being a buzz band, being a band that was doing something that nobody else was doing. Nobody saw us coming. Pretty much like any other band, the Roses, Oasis, whatever. That's just two, broad examples, but so when that disappears, when that dissipates, when it goes down a bit, because it does, you you become enraged. You know, it's like, what the fuck? All these other bands were coming after you, and you know, now I realise there's nothing wrong with that, because there's a place for everyone. It doesn't matter whether you like them or not. There's a place for everyone, fortunately. You know,
Yeah.
so you know, it gets a bit. Yeah, I just got wound up about that. So the anger continued, and it got to a point last year where it was like, but I'm still fucked up about certain people. Why I'm fucked up about them? You know, what the fuck? What have they got to do with what I do? You know.
I feel a little bit like, so I should say, I talk about it on the podcast all the time.
Yeah.
It's definitely part of my identity. But I have OCD, so I have had treatment. Well, I have regular treatment.
Right.
I'm a little bit hungover today actually, because I went to my OCD group. So I last night, like a sort of support group that I go to, and
Yeah.
we go to the pub afterwards and kind of have a laugh. And I always end up hanging after my meetings, but it's it's a fast it's almost like go in a room and talk about all the worst things that's ever happened to you, and then and then go get hammered. But there's it's interesting that that disorder, in that it really makes you, it really kind of drills into, it makes thought sticky, and like I've had things before, certainly after 20 years in the music industry, where I felt like I felt like people have done me wrong, and in some cases it's not all in my head. In some cases I have met some appalling people, but it sticks in your head, and sometimes I will find myself, Friday night watching, a movie with my wife and just being angry about someone from like 15 years ago. And is that a little bit like what you're describing?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah. That's that's very uncanny, actually. It's
I, I have a bit
I
of a
do,
habit.
yeah, I do, yeah, I do still.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I have a bit of a habit of this with people where I'm like, it's fun. I mean, I'm not diagnosing you right now, but I'm just like, for me, it was like an intersection with like a sort of they say OCD is hereditary. My dad was definitely
So what's the definition of OCD? Because I mean, there was a period a few years back, 10 years ago, where everybody said they had it, didn't they? And it was almost like, because it had come to light as this thing, people were then trying to go, oh well, fuck me, I've got it. And it's like, well, no, you just like your pen being neat near your keyboard. That's not OCD.
Well, listen, because we've only got 10 minutes, I'll rattle through this very quick because there's a few more things I want to ask you about music. But what I'll say is that top line synopsis is that when I was 19 and I was at
Yeah,
university,
yeah.
I suddenly out of nowhere got obsessed that I was HIV positive, like just
Oh
obsessed.
fuck me! Don't fucking hell! Jesus Christ, you're jesting. Me too. Me too. I had. Yeah, sorry. But yeah, I did.
Well,
It was traumatic.
yeah, I mean, I could not. I mean, I would go for. I think I think in one year I went for 6 tests. Like
Fucking hell.
it was obscene, and eventually they whacked me on a load of drugs, and those kind of thoughts went, and then kind of within about 6 years, when I moved to London, and looking back, it was still going on in between, but it was more of a lull than it had been. But when I moved to London, and don't freak out when I say this because I talk about it on the podcast a lot, but my next theme, the thing I next obsessed about, was that people thought I was a paedophile, and that was horrifying because who wants people to think they're a paedophile? And
That's fucked. I mean, why did you think that?
well, this is it. Well, I mean, to be honest, I'm writing a book about OCD at the moment, and actually,
Right,
it kind of goes into some detail about maybe why that arrived. But
right.
I always joke and say that OCD, like HIV and paedophilia, is almost like the Beatles and the Stones of OCD themes. It feels like,
Really, is it?
yeah, you feel like you're the only person who has it, and then you go into a room of other sufferers, and like everyone's got it, But basically, what it is, it targets the things that you don't want to be. It targets the things that matter to you. It targets
Right.
like targets your values, your belief systems.
Yeah.
But I'm sure there's loads of other things as well. I mean, like I say, we are slightly different in age, but we definitely grew up in a time when for example, with the HIV thing, where it was just
yeah,
screaming at you at the telly every day, basically going, "You're gonna
yeah,
die. You know, you're gonna die. You're gonna die. You're gonna die."
yeah. Well, this is yeah, definitely, yeah,
I,
yeah,
so I do wonder. I'm like I say, I'm not diagnosing you because that would be like morally very
yeah,
dubious. But
yeah,
I do
yeah,
wonder whether next time you're at the doctor's, if you can get a doctor's appointment,
yeah,
it might be worth saying something like, "Listen, I was speaking to this journalist, and he, you know, talks about OCD extensively, and it
yeah.
felt a little bit familiar to me, you know." So,
Well, I tell my psychotherapist, I don't know if he would be qualified to diagnose that, but he's never said anything about it.
I
But
mean,
I've started. Go on, sorry.
no. Go on, Jason.
Um, I have compulsive thoughts like like uh, lot. I don't know actually. Just people getting into the house and killing me. So I bought a stick. I keep under the bed because my dad had one, and I asked him. I constantly think about that.
I mean that sounds. I don't want to say it, but that sounds familiar.
Yeah, and I constantly think about the kids getting run over or something, but I think that's just natural parent whatever. But there's quite a few things to be honest. I now before I get into bed at night, I roll my clothes up in neat rolled piles and put my socks in a neat pile on top of my shoes, and my shoes sit on top of my rolled clothes. So when I wake up in the morning, all I have to do is go like that. There's none of that. But it's become a bit, everything has to be in its place as well, which I know is a kind of generalized, stereotypical notion about OCD. But
Yeah, but
uh,
I think what it is that I think that when you have had like a traumatic childhood or you've
mm,
had difficulties like in early life, like
yeah,
it becomes basically about trying to bring some control to your life when you feel like you've got none. You know, it's sort of
yes,
like
yes,
that, and it because it's. I mean, I've spoke to loads of like researchers and
yeah, yeah,
psychologists in recent years, and you know, I think that it is basically your brain trying to make you safe, but just getting it
yeah,
really wrong. Listen, we should. I'm
yeah,
sure. I do. This podcast is very regular. I'm sure I'll speak
sure.
to you again down the line.
Okay,
But
all
just
right, yeah.
just before we wrap up, so when's the tour? When do you go out and play these songs?
It starts in April in America. We go to Coachella and we do a small US tour, and then we come back. Then we go over to Australia and New Zealand, and then we come back and get European festivals. We're not doing that many UK ones this year, and then back to Europe for a European tour, and then back to the UK at the end of the year.
What do Americans make of what you do?
Well, the last time we went over, I noticed a lot more blue collar workers than the other times that I'd been. Perhaps I'm just getting used to American culture, and working class people over there are different. They look different. Obviously, they talk different. Obviously, their vocations are similar, but I got the impression there was a lot of people of that ilk turning up to the gigs. And just listening and intently, you know what I mean. So it reminded me of the early days of playing in England, you know what I mean. So I think if we keep going over there on a regular basis, then we will build up a fairly big following. I think we're not going to be U2, I don't think, but it will. I think there'll be a strong relationship if we just keep adding to it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. What was so Perry Farrell's a bit of a dream guest for the podcast.
He was, yeah.
What
Oh God, right, yeah, I can imagine, yeah.
what's he like?
Yeah, he's lovely. I've only spoke to him once, and he's very much how you would see someone from that period being.
Yeah.
He comes from a period in the music scene in Los Angeles around that time was very vibrant. You know what I mean? There was lots of experimental bands, creating genres. You know what I mean?
Do you,
Uh,
do you know what I really like about that song? Is it feels like I mean you're going to tell me I'm totally wrong now, but it feels like especially sitting on a record called UK Grim, and and it really being. I mean, I've sort of deliberately not really discussed themes of the record because it's just the sidebar on Twitter, really, isn't it? You know, but
yeah,
what
yeah,
I really like about that song is I just feel like it's hard and it's accentuated by the fact that Perry's on it. Is that it feels like escapism? It feels like fantasy. It feels like, I don't know. There's almost something about it which is like what you would hope that the future would be, as opposed to maybe what it's going to be. Am I off base?
yeah. I think it's just there's a presence on the record is really bright, and
Yeah,
it initially threw us because we're not used to that. We don't do bright records as such. So um, it grated. It was almost like, does this work? But it does. It really does work. And you're correct in that. It's almost is like a bit of escapism, but relates back to as you've said, the song's subject matter. The constant logging in and face identity that you have to do to access your phone, and then blah blah blah. So yes, I don't know. It just takes off, doesn't it? When he comes in, it's still a weird one. I don't know if I'll ever be able to completely objectify it. You know what I mean?
yeah. Listen, before I go, the other thing I just thought was the Depop thing sounds a bit OCD.
Well, I've got a few of them. I do Depop, Vestery. I do, obviously, Instagram is great for it. Secondhand wear, Facebook, anything really.
Yeah,
It's
I got absolutely obsessed with Panini sticker books at one point. Where it was really like, my wife would be like, "Well, it's that time of the month for the mortgage," and I'd be a little bit like, "Oh yeah."
don't. I've got like that with trainers as well. I've got boxes of trainers under my bed. I've not worn them yet. But I go to bed thinking I'm going to wear those with that outfit, and I just keep thinking that, these things come into your head, and I spend most of the day thinking about that.
Listen, let's definitely do a part. I'll speak to the arbiters of
Yes,
chaos over at Rough Trade,
yes,
and we'll do a part. We'll do a part.
sure.
We'll do a part two at some point, and we'll see. I'll talk to you a little bit more about music than
Yes,
OCD.
okay, yeah, love to.
Yeah. Listen, Jason, it's been great speaking to you, man. I'll speak to you
You
again.
too. Take care. All right.
All right, guys. See you later. Ta-ra.